Welcome back to A Few of the Many. Be here. I couldn't make it to record this episode, but somehow they managed to cope without me, so in light of National Women's Day, enjoy the ramblings of our all-male hosts. This week, the guys will be discussing the national headache that has been Brexit, how they voted, how they'd vote again, and their feelings about a second referendum. So be sure to check it out, and I'll be back soon.
There are actually, I don't know what they call them, but there is actually like 10,000 people belong to the Facebook group of people who are hoarding in case of a no-deal Brexit, giving each other survival tips and that. You know what? They've got the right idea. The health secretary was on Radio 4. He was on Radio 4 yesterday, and he was asked, can you guarantee that no one will die specifically because of a no-deal Brexit? Can you guarantee that you've got plans in place, if there's a no-deal, no one will die? Well, no, you can't guarantee anything like that, you know like that, right?
Use the word NHS, you can't guarantee anything.
And then he says, obviously people die all the time. He says, no, you know what I mean. I'm talking about, will people die as a consequence of not being able to get medication because of a no-deal Brexit? Well, we put contingent. Will people die? Can you guarantee? I don't know. You know what I mean? And then he said, well, in that case, obviously, in your position as health minister, you're going to vote against the no-deal Brexit.
So when they're printing the blue passports out, if the ink's toxic in any way, shape or form, and it kills the whole workforce...
They're going to be made in France, And he says, so obviously, knowing that you can't guarantee people won't die, you are going to do all you possibly can to avoid a no-deal Brexit. Well, why should I do that? I shouldn't be tied by my ministerial position. I should be able to have a free vote and do what I like.
I think this is what I think his job's been, up to now, been doing what he likes.
Yeah, we all know the BBC's biased and stuff, but over the last few weeks, every minister they've had in, they've tried to nail, can you guarantee that if there's a no-deal Brexit, this won't happen, that won't happen? And they've all said, well, you can't guarantee anything, you know what I mean? I was like, what is going on here? And you still do think... flighty British spirit and all that sort of thing will survive. We don't need them, you know what I mean? And Japan and Canada and Korea and China have already said they're not going to give us preferential deals on the same terms as Europe, because Europe's a massive market and we're a tiny little fish.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's like, I think we will survive outside the EU, but it's like the idea that we're going to be this world conquering power.
Yeah.
We don't have India anymore. We don't have...
Britain went mental when Greg's introduced a vegan pasty, a vegan sausage roll, we haven't got that blitz spirit anymore. KFC runs out of chicken and people moan and moan and moan for weeks about it.
Well, not to forget the perennial, although that may change with global warming, but the snow. Whenever snow comes on, it's like, what are we going to do?
The wrong kind of leaves are on the track. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. People have got this idea that we're still a world-conquering colonial master.
And I, for one, am glad, because we ain't got a Churchillian kind of leader who blags his way through, sticking his fingers up at folk, smoking big old foreign cigars.
Yeah. So there's three of us here recording this podcast.
Yes.
How did we vote in Brexit? Do we support the call for a second referendum? And how do any of us personally feel about the whole Brexit process? Start with you, Dave.
I voted to leave. I want the softest Brexit we can have now. I voted leave primarily to kill the Tories, because I know they'd eat themselves, and they are. And
do you support the call for a second referendum?
No. I think it's political suicide. I think what it is we had the greatest manifesto 2 years ago that we've had for a long time, since 45, and it says we will respect the leave vote. We must adhere to that.
Righto.
Sorry.
Righto. No. Don't apologise for your views, Dave.
Oh, no. All it is I was being blunt with it. But, so we've got to appease the people that said, can we remain, please, by saying we want the softest Brexit we can have.
Yeah.
But you've got to go with what people voted for democratically and say, yes, we will leave.
Righto. What about you, Mike?
Well, I initially voted Remain, and that's because, I thought for all intents and purposes the EU was the moderating force in the world. Do I still stand by that 2 years later? I'm kind of in the same camp as Dave, because if I were another vote now, I would definitely vote Leave. But I want the softest Brexit possible. I'm not one of these hard Brexiters.
Yeah.
What changed my mind was everyone says, oh, but we do have democratic representation in the European Parliament because we elect our MPs. And it's like they can't make laws, though. They can just amend laws which the Commission hands down as proposed legislation. So what kind of legislature can't propose legislation?
Yeah.
And you call that democrat? I mean, and people say, oh, like our friends in the Alliance for Workers' Liberty say that we need to stay and remain and reform. And it's like, how would you realistically propose to reform those institutions?
Yeah.
Isn't Marxism all about the fact that, you can't really reform capitalist institutions because the EU is a capitalist institution?
Exactly. It's just a bankers group, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's all it is.
Then you get onto the people who are like, fight for migrant workers' rights, which I totally agree with. Don't get me wrong in the slightest. But they say the EU defends our wonderful freedom of movement. It's like, yeah, you just look just a bit beyond the borders of the European Union to all these virtual concentration camps for migrants that the EU funds in Libya. They used to have agreements with Gaddafi. Yeah. And, even they still try in the wreckage of Libya today.
Yeah.
The ones in Turkey, where they're just... It's like the migrant crisis in 2015. There were a lot of migrants coming in. And I think this is partly to do with, obviously, the instability which NATO has inflicted or encouraged in places like Syria, in Libya, places like that. And, of course, climate change as well, which, we have some responsibility for.
Yeah.
There were millions coming in because of all this instability and ecological crisis.
Yeah.
It's gone down now to pre-2015 levels, migrants coming in, but they're still obsessively trying to keep migrants out.
Yeah.
It's like they're working with Erdogan, the fascist in Turkey, and saying, we'll give you some money, build more camps, keep these people out.
Yeah.
And, of course, I'm not one of these people who believes now in the idea that there should be no borders, because I think that's premature. While we still live in a world which is beset by crises caused by ecological damage, what we should be doing is building up other countries' infrastructure to...
Yeah.
I think ultimately I would like to see all nations abolished, just through the general transition to socialism and the end of capitalist rivalries.
Yeah.
I would be in favour of freedom of movement to an extent, but you see a lot of these people who are complaining because, they can't go on their gap year or because...
I know what you mean. What it is what I'd always go for. I know we've got to come to your answers.
I don't mind. No, carry on.
What I've always, I know it's kind of a dreamer's way of looking at things, but that thing of if every country was a socialist state, there'd be no need to go to another state because we'd all play by the same rules. Everybody'd be treated fairly and get a good wage, right? So the only way that you'd go to, not the only way, because you might fall in love with somebody from another country, but you'd go for art, you'd go for culture, right? And that's a beautiful thing. People would come to Britain and go, wow, it's beautiful and fantastic. You've got great theatres. But we're going back because our jobs are there.
And well-paying jobs.
Exactly. You know what I mean? There'd be no rush to leave your own country.
Yeah.
I know it's, like I say, it's a dream, but it could work if everybody was treated with respect. No, I'm going to sound like Boy George, folks. No wars. Yeah. Because we're all basically singing the same tune.
Yeah.
Conflict would be at an end because would all be treated the same. Perfect.
I just wanted to finish my Brexit thing.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about my views on Brexit.
I think we've got three differing views from Brexit because
so.
I was full on, you was full the other way, you was one way, and now you've gone the other way. So we've got.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So I know this. He's an uncle of my mates, and he's kind of like your liberal greenie sort of type.
Allotment older.
He's not that quite down market. He's quite up market.
All right.
Anyway, this is what he wrote yesterday about the upcoming Brexit. He said, so today I tried to buy some European web addresses which would enable me to expand my business in the 27 other EU countries, but was not allowed to do so because of Britain exiting the EU. What a joy that was to find out. Thanks to everyone who voted to make it harder for me to make money. I just hope it's all worth it. My mate was like, goddamn democracy.
That is brilliant. That's brilliant. That is very good. Very good.
And I was just like, isn't that just neoliberalism in a nutshell? Or like, I've got all these views, but really it's all about making money and food for class people. If you get in my way of, if you like damage my worldview in any way.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, like you were talking about dream scenario,
Yeah.
And also about borders. You mentioned about borders earlier. I believe there should be no restriction on any borders ever, simply because it's a class thing for me. When people close borders, rich footballers can still cross borders.
Exactly.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Rich multi-millionaires.
Manchester United buy the £30 million Eritrean super striker, but they don't let anybody else come from Eritrea because they're not a footballer.
Yeah, if we absolutely shut up shop, Bill Gates could fly in.
Oh yeah.
So it's a class thing for me. It penalises the poor, and the poorer you are, the less chance you've got of getting in.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why it really pisses me off when working classes in this country are beguiled by the right-wing philosophy of we're best, keep everybody out, they're trouble. You know what I mean? Because all they're doing is being the tool of the establishment to persecute other poor people. And they feel that hatred and disillusionment, and I'm not saying they haven't got just cause, because I feel the same. I'm pissed off the NHS is in such a state and at a crisis and massively overworked and underfunded. I'm pissed off that council houses are scarce as anything. I'm pissed off that it takes you 2 weeks to get a doctor's interview and that you can't get your kid into your favourite school. I'm pissed off with all those things too.
Yeah.
But it's not other poor people that have done that.
No.
It's that thing of class war in the horriblest way because the same class are fighting with the same class.
Yes, that's exactly it. But getting back to my opinion on Brexit and the whole thing, it's really strange, because Europe is the one issue. Ask me about education, I know where I stand. Ask me about the NHS, I know where I stand. Europe and its involvement in Europe is one area where I've never known exactly which side of the fence I lie. Simply because, first off, I believe that the more local power is, the more people get engaged. So it's really difficult for the average person to affect Westminster without having another layer of bureaucratic malevolence on top of that that's only another country. And I can understand that anti-Europe feeling, I really can. For instance, I think the fact the National Investment Bank plans in the manifesto, they're the things that excite me the most. Having local communities decide where investment is put in local communities, that's going to build resilience into a political system that's going to take the Tories 40 years to smash.
Absolutely.
Because if local people are involved in where investment goes in their local towns, working as a cooperative, it's going to dramatically change society and rebuild community, that sense of community you've said of lost.
Yeah.
And I believe that the more power local people have, the better. So I'm naturally anti-Europe. But at the same time, it is a connection of peoples across borders, and that I believe in 100%. So I voted Remain. We had a debate in Ashfield, and there were sound socialist reasons to leave. But I just couldn't do it in the end, for two reasons. The first one was putting my cross in the same box as Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. Just couldn't do it. And the second one was more serious. Leaving this government, who I already hated and distrusted and thought were evil, malevolent, self-serving, leaving this government in charge of the single biggest change to our constitution in 200 years or so, I just couldn't, it scared the life out of me. And I think some of those fears are coming to fruition. You're right, Dave. It did make the Tories eat themselves. But they're still there. And there's not been a general election yet. But ironically, second referendum, I'd vote out in a second.
Why the change exactly?
Two things. I watched a documentary about what that Europe did to Greece. And I know that happened before the Brexit vote. And I know the leader of Syriza is still saying stay and reform from within. I know that. But I think that's a personal attack on socialism.
Again, right, the thing that we must understand that socialism, as we want it, is the people, right? The people that are telling you you're wrong are the establishment, and it's the man at the top of the tree, it's Syriza, it's the people that wear the suits across the board in Brussels. It's the people at the top are saying it, right? There is people in Italy that are socialists that are saying this is a good thing. There are people in Spain that are going, we're socialists, leave, this could be a good thing.
Yes.
Right? We're not alone by saying there is a better way. We don't need to be attached at the top. Europe
Socialist coalition of the people.
Exactly.
That's what it should
right?
be.
The way Europe is, and this is the way I can't really articulate it the way I want to, but the way I see Europe, it's that Brussels, the elite that are attached at the top, right? All the people, us, we're attached by the same issues, poor housing, healthcare. So we want socialism for all of us, not being attached by those Brussels bankers.
So the second reason I changed my mind and would vote out in a hot second is that education. I've educated myself on the formation of Europe, how it's conducted itself, and because I thought, yes, it helps people be less racist, and I thought, yes, it helps us all feel European and as one. I don't believe either of those things now. And I don't think for one second that the European Union combats racism. Not anymore. I don't think it ever did. And the fact that it was set up by bankers and lawyers and all that. So I'm anti-Europe now. I would leave. But like you two, I want the absolute softest Brexit possible. I want absolutely guaranteed rights for European nationals who are here already to stay here.
Yeah, no question about that.
None of that nonsense. None of that far-right reasons for Brexit. None of that. I think, ironically, brilliantly, the Irish situation is going to bring the Tories down. You know? I think it's absolutely impossible for the Tories to resolve this situation. You know what I mean? They can't go with one option because the DUP will be fucking livid. They can't go with the other option at all because the IRA will dig up their guns. Yeah. They already have started doing that. There's been a bomb on Ireland already, and there were bomb scares this weekend in the north and south of England that were IRA related. So that's already happening, and I think that was to just remind the government, you know what I mean, that they best not do that, you know. So I've got another question about Brexit. It's now what, March the what?
7th, is it?
7th. 8th.
Well, it says the 8th here.
It's International Women's Day anyway, so we're in the countdown. What do you think will happen? Predict the next month in politics in Britain.
It's almost like a scene in the movie where it's just like two people fighting for some stupid reason, about to roll off a cliff, and we will probably roll off the cliff without even realising it. You know, people are like, people are like going down to the wire. I mean, there's this meaningful vote next week, and Theresa May is now talking about, there might be delays to Brexit, or it may never happen at all. She is starting to realise through that colossally thick, nuclear-proof bunker of a head of hers that everything is not going her way, and just repeating the same tired cliches over and over isn't actually against an economic superpower known as the EU.
Yeah, I can't see it happening on the 29th. Yeah, something catastrophic's going to have to happen. It's just a strange one.
So what do we reckon? Far right riots on the street when it's delayed?
No.
I agree.
I think we'll go back to the apathy in the this land of milk and honey that is Britain, where it's all we'll do this, we'll do that, and nothing will happen.
You see, I think apathy. There's a real danger. Talking about democracy and stuff. Well, first off, I never mentioned how I felt about the actual referendum when I was talking about Brexit earlier. And first off, referendums aren't legally binding in this country. And I remember this staunch Brexiter starting a petition just before the Brexit vote, saying that it has to be more tthan 10% difference to be legally viable and stuff.
Oh yeah,
and like 100,000 people signed this signature, and he got rid of it because he thought it was the Brexit vote was going to go against him, and we were going to remain. You know what I mean? And again, one thing that particularly dismayed me about Brexit is the dishonesty on both sides.
Yeah, it was a dirty campaign.
So it's all right to say the people democratically chose. But I literally know 100 people who voted out who've changed their mind now since and would vote Remain. The day after, we made a mistake about that 350 million quid, you know.
Yeah, that's... the cretin with the ear and the Cornish pasty on the steps of the bus.
Yeah.
If you think about what he was saying, it's just madness. I didn't listen to any of that shite, I'll be honest. I didn't. But I campaigned to Remain because I'm in the Labour Party, and that was their stance. So I campaigned happily to Remain, but I knew all along that I was going to vote to leave, just because it was my personal view, yeah? So I was doing what the party asked and then did my duty to me, right? It's that thing of, hold on a minute, we know that politicians, by and large, just say what they think you want to hear, right? So you have to look at it through the filter that is you, right? And like we said before, banking system, not really. I don't really buy the thing where we elect our MEPs and they speak for us because it's that commission at the top that, like we said earlier. So that really bothered me, because that's not really democracy as I see it. You know, if there was in that commission, a big drag towards the right, because you never know in Europe, it's happened before.
That's the way that it's happening, actually.
Right,
Yeah.
right. If there's a big drag towards to right-wingism, I don't want to be part of it, thanks. Right? So don't drag us into your fascist state, right? So that also scared me. I did mention it in my branch. We had a discussion at the time, and I was like, I don't want to be attached to any kind of neo-fascist that's in Central Europe. Calm down. We can still be friends. We just don't have to pay our friends' gas bill. You understand what I mean?
I'm just looking at the totals for the European elections since 1979 when they first came in. Started out with the Socialists being narrowly in the lead in 79 with like 27.6% of the vote, highest bloc. Conservatives at 26. Over the years, that has gone up to, at the last elections, Conservatives being well in the lead on 36, Socialists down to 25%. They've got the Liberals in the middle with about 11. So you can see the trajectory there, and that is with turnout becoming lower and lower.
Yeah.
It's like the right wing who are gaining the ascendancy more and more.
Yeah.
So you've got Viktor Orban, you've got the nutters in Poland who are like trying to overturn abortion rights and things like that. And the EU is just like, oh, you can't do that, but we're not actually going to do anything to stop you.
And the danger you talked about you've got to follow democracy and stuff like that. Because there was a particularly high turnout for the Brexit vote.
Massive.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think you encourage people to turn out and then they don't see the results of their action. It's just going to feed into the establishment's hands, because people are just going to think, why bother? You don't listen when I vote anyway.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, it's a very,
and
very
that's going to make it
thing.
even harder for socialism to make a difference.
So yeah, we've been trying to structure this interesting mess of a show we've had so far, which have been really good discussions, fast few episodes, but we've been wanting to introduce new segments, new topics of discussion, and have little different bits and pieces in the podcast from episode to episode. And one of them we've come up with is Andy Chambers' Working Class History section, which is kind of what it says on the tin. Not very well known actions by workers in previous years and what they teach us about modern day and how they can apply to our own struggle today.
Yeah, and I think the main reason I wanted this section is that I'm 50 now, and I've been connected to my working class roots my whole working life. And I work hard. But if once a boss tries to take the mickey out of me, I tell him to stick his job and I go somewhere else. You know, because I feel the struggle of generations and generations before me, and I know what they've fought for. And I think if I let one boss take the piss out of me, I've betrayed my ancestors, you know, and I can feel it in my blood. I can feel it coursing through my veins. And that also helps me cope with the battle within the Labour Party and the battle without the Labour Party. It inspires me. There's a People's History Museum in Manchester. There's a little display case. Inside that display case are two truncheons, one plain and battered. They're both mean-looking devices. One's plain and wood, the other one's black shiny paint with an emblem on. And the story behind them is that during the general strike in 1926, when people were already living on poverty wages, and the government announced a new trench of cuts, right, that were going to make them even worse, there was a general strike. And people weren't even asking for improvement. They just wanted things to stay the same, because they knew if they went worse, they'd be dying. And so the country went on strike. The government hired special constables, which is like the thug in the village, gave them these brown truncheons and said, go and smash the strike, go and batter picket lines, break houses. This is the government paying thugs to fight socialists, you know? People coming together and saying, enough's enough, we can't have any more. If you did that for 9 days, battered the strike for 9 days, you got awarded a special commemorative truncheon at the end of the strike. And that's the government giving a commemorative truncheon for the 9 days you've been beating up your neighbour. And I think until they get the water cannon and the tanks out, I'm not going to face a struggle like those strikers faced on that picket line,
Yeah.
you know, where I see an army of thugs coming down with truncheons that have already got blood on from the day before, coming to cave my head in. And so all the battles that have gone before me, and some of them are genuine battles, they inspire me to, like Ben said, toughen up. The battle's not over. It's constantly won and constantly lost. You know, so I've introduced this section to the podcast to try and inspire, because I know that even within my CLP there are people who are fed up to it, you know what I mean, to try and inspire people to just hang in there. You know, we're so close. And I've got a couple of things that are topical, because it's March. And the first one I want to talk about, it happened in February, so we're a little late recording this, but in February 68, 1,300 black sanitation workers in Memphis went on strike, and they were protesting against discrimination, the mistreatment they were facing, and dangerous working conditions. Within the last 2 months before the strike, 2 of their colleagues drowned in the sewers. You know, they died working. So they were striking for better conditions, less racism, equal treatment, and better health and safety. And the mayor, Memphis at the time, employed white scab workers and sent police and soldiers to break up the strike. And that led to the death of one teenage striker. He was only 17. Martin Luther King went twice to speak to Memphis, to speak to the strikers. In fact, more than that, several times. And he spoke to them on April the 3rd, saying that their people would make it to the promised land if they stuck together in solidarity. The next day he was assassinated. And that's a massive demoralising blow to the strikers, obviously. Martin Luther King's a hero of theirs. But instead of letting that deflate them, it steeled their resolve. And they carried on, and later that month the city caved in and struck a deal granting them the vast majority of their demands. And that strike happened in February 68, and that was great inspiration for black people all over the country to take part in the 68 revolution and the civil...
The second phase of the civil rights, when it was going to more the black power thing.
Yes, yeah. And not only that, it inspired workers all over this place, because that year, union recruitment went up fourfold. And so that's one particular thing that I've been reading a lot about the Memphis strike, and it's real solidarity in action. And they were not only facing a hostile boss, they were facing racism and the police and soldiers and the death of one of their workers on strike. I mean, how brave would you have to be to go on a picket line the next day after Martin Luther King comes to speak to you and he's shot the next day,
Yeah.
and one of your strikers gets shot by a soldier,
Yeah.
just on a peaceful picket line?
Yeah.
You know, how brave. And that really inspires me, that story. So, yeah, I don't want to just talk about I want your feedback and what you think about the situations and that sort of thing, you know what I mean? So what do you think about this one?
It's true everywhere. What it is, again, if we don't stand together, we all fall.
Yeah.
It's like Orgreave, yeah? It's like, granted, the coppers in 84, 85 didn't have guns, but they were massed against striking blows.
Yeah.
Right, and their wives who supported them.
Yeah.
Right, it's wrong. It's that thing of, if you can't protect your livelihood, right, the only thing that you have, your labour, it's wrong.
So that's the Memphis strike in 68 that happened in February.
Anyway, folks, we're wrapping up the show this evening.
Well, actually, Dave, I've got one last thing I'd like to say.
Go on, Andy.
I know this has been an all-boy podcast.
Ironically, on International Women's Day, we've got none of our women members, which is a bit annoying, but so it goes.
And it's International Women's Day. I wanted to say the final word on, because one of my heroes is a woman, Emma Goldman. She was an anarchist and a political activist and a writer from the 20s, 30s and 40s. And I'd just like to conclude this thing, I'd like to read a quote, one of my favourite quotes from her. And she said, and don't forget, she died in 40. I think she said this quote in 1936, right, which is brilliant, I think.
Yeah.
She said, "I demand the independence of woman, her right to support herself, to live for herself, to love whomever she pleases, or as many as she pleases. I demand freedom for both sexes, freedom of action, freedom in love, and freedom in motherhood." And I just think that speaks to my heart, that does.
Perfect.
Without a doubt.
It's brilliant.
Oh, beautiful. What a way to end our podcast on. Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for coming. And
Cheers.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.